tool communities, where we sort of track various folks who are in various stages of outreach to those communities. A lot of them are language communities because that's kind of where a lot of this is going to hopefully land. And so if you would be interested in signing up, Jamie, for outreach towards the .NET folks, that would certainly be welcome, but you need not. That's entirely up to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I work at Microsoft, but not on .NET directly. Some of the work I've been doing is just because I had a project that I was working on and wanted a .NET implementation of Gitbomb. But yeah, feel free to sign me up for that, and I can reach out to folks.
Awesome, thank you.
Trying to spell your name from memory. Okay, cool, excellent. All right then. So we don't have Nell here today. Sadly, I think Nell is out sick. But if you go and you look at the Slack channel, the OmniBOR Slack channel, and please note the Slack channel has been renamed Pound OmniBOR. Thank you, Deva, for that. You will see that there is an ongoing discussion about possibly moving the time of this call. And it's slowly converging. So the call for volunteers to help with social media, I think this one can probably be retired at this point. Barathi has been doing a wonderful job of getting the videos up on YouTube, and Chris is now fully in control of getting fully integrated with the Twitter side of the house. We finally sorted that out. It had turned out that for some reason I don't understand, the wrong password was up in the one password, so that got solved. Yeah, I don't even ask. I don't even know.
Yeah, don't know how.
So, all right then.
So I'm gonna ninja edit that one and bring up Mastodon, since it's also came up on the Slack discussion yesterday about Twitter. It's maybe worthwhile soonish to have a Mastodon presence and echo some of the things we post on Twitter or news over there. I don't see a lot of engagement, though. And this is the flip side of it. I see a lot of the opposite of engagement, willful disengagement from corporate brands and even open source project names. That said, government institutions, particularly in Europe, have set up their own instances for DNS verification that, yes, they are in fact the Bundeswehr or whomever from Germany, France, UK. And some open source projects and foundations, the OSI, has our own Mastodon.
I didn't know that.
Yes, yeah. So there's the official Twitter account for the OSI. Is also now an official Mastodon, which is used in the same way. It's a micro instance with, I believe, only one user, and that's the OSI's user account.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering how people are doing that. Is it single user? Are you allowing signups, that kind of thing?
Nope, single user. It is or in the case of, say, the German government, there are multiple users on the German government-owned domain name, but each user corresponds to a single agency in the German government.
That's cool.
Right, so it is agency at germanyinstance.org or .de.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my recollection of where this had sort of left off. Is there'd been a discussion about it before. The question had become up, okay, a Mastodon account where? And the previous conclusion had been we should stand up our own Mastodon server as you described.
I'm not yet aware of anyone doing a put all your open source projects on this instance, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone does, because we have like journa.host, where a whole lot of journalists are setting up their broadcast accounts on a shared domain. So far, Hackeyderm has welcomed, with caveats, some open source based companies like Tailscale. It's the first one that I noticed because I know folks there, but others are there as well. So that's, of the Mastodon instances we wouldn't have to run, Hackeyderm is probably the most approachable today, at least that I'm aware of.
Yeah, and early on, I was on the admin team. I've kind of stepped away because they've grown in number and, past my skill sets. But that seems to be the one with the model I think is going to last the longest right now, too, right? Like, other than standing up our own. which I'm not opposed to, right? Like DigitalOcean, I think has like a one-click stand-up thing. So
a couple bucks a month, click, stand up
Yeah.
a micro instance.
mhm.
Cool.
So
All
just
right,
keep
then.
talking about it, punt on it for now.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of somebody needs to pick it up and go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to stand up a server and go, but I don't have any access to registrars, DNS, anything like that.
Oh, well, we can sort that out.
Ping me. We can sort that out.
Okay,
Yeah,
Cool.
that's all sortable.
Awesome.
awesome. Thank you.
Cool. All right, upcoming events. Do you want to put your ShmooCon talk here, Ava?
Sure. Give me 2 shakes.
And we should probably also put here, I think we have a talk coming up in a few weeks at
Native Security
Supply Chain
Summit.
Yeah, we should probably get that here as well. I would do it, but I'm currently sharing. It's a great excuse. We also had, you made the suggestion, Ava, that we look into, and this CFP is closing fast, doing something at Usenix Security. So we should probably, folks should probably get talk proposals in there. And then Chris, you had provided us with lots and lots of fodder here, which I have not yet.
Yeah, those 3 are my go-to sites, right? Like if you're looking for conferences.
Yep. We should probably talk to the Cloud Native Sec folks about rebranding the talk title.
We should.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, that's probably just a quick email.
Yep, I agree. So that's kind of where we stand on events. I think we had muttered a little bit about this still being in a holding pattern at the beginning of the call on the blog post stuff.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay. All right. The renaming Git bomb to OmniBOR stuff. And I just realized that things are slightly incorrectly invented over here. It's driving me nuts. There we go. Renaming Git bomb to OmniBOR. So this has actually been done. The website is now updated. So if we go and we look at omnibor.io, looks like this. If we try and go to the old gitbomb.dev, it sends us to omnibor.io.
Nice.
Which is good. Spec updates, the sort of very simple lift and shift on the spec that has been merged. So if you go look at the spec, it's all in terms of OmniBOR. In doing so, there's a lot of other little tweaks I would like to make, but you don't mix the streams, don't cross the streams. The Twitter account migration is done. We now have this lovely new OmniBOR, where we've got OmniBOR Universal Bill of Receipts, and the announcement tweet went out. It is doing quite well. We've got 5,600 views, lots of tweets and quote tweets and likes.
Mhm.
So folks are very pleased. The calendar, the Zoom and Google Calendar. So the Zoom account itself has not been renamed, but if you go to the calendar, the community meetings, the calendar itself has been renamed. The meeting has been renamed. The Slack channel has been renamed. And we did do the announcement tweet yesterday to catch that good Tuesdayness.
Yeah, it was actually timed well
And-
too. Like between like 9 and 2 is the best time to post stuff. So we just got it in there.
Yep. And we got this lovely graphic sort of expressing the thing, and this is now the pinned tweet on the OmniBOR account so that folks can see that. So I mean, I think it all worked out quite well.
Good job, team.
Woohoo! Yeah, I love I love it when a plan comes together.
Yep. Cool. Very happy.
Cool.
That
All right.
went as well as it did.
Me too.
Thank you both, and everybody else, especially you two.
I mostly just sort of made like semi-encouraging noises at Chris. So
You know, it's one of those things that if you don't, it's not going to be right. So.
oh, I'm well aware. They also serve who make semi-encouraging noises. All right, so I think this brings us around to Jamie. You had your so anything else on the OmniBOR switchover?
Nothing here. Nope.
Cool. So this brings us around to Jamie. Do you want me to go ahead and let you share?
Yeah, I'll steal the screen share for a sec.
Give me 1 second to fix the security thing because I always forget to do that.
Oh, do I
There
know
we go.
permissions? Is that okay?
Now you
Now
should.
I can click. Okay. Just a sec. So I'm going to try and share a remote desktop screen. So let's see how that goes. Are you able to see that?
Yes.
Yes. Now.
Okay, cool.
It took a beat, but yes.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I'm joining the call from my laptop, but I do most of my like development work on a more powerful workstation that I remote into. So sometimes it's a little bit finicky, but yeah. So I have this .NET library for GitBOM for Gitoid. I kind of created it last year for like a little hacking around on a project that I was working on. And I decided just to throw it up on GitHub. Frederick reached out to me and said, hey, this is interesting. Why don't you throw it on the agenda for GitBOM or OmniBOR, as I should get used to calling it now.
Sorry.
I'm here for like 2 seconds and I've already got refactoring I got to do. But yeah, so I kind of based it on Nell's work on GitBOM RS. So it should have all the same functionality. And I put together some benchmarks, mostly for my own interest to see, like I have SHA-1 and asynchronous versions of that, and also the 256 version. And it seems like SHA-1 synchronous seems to be the winner. But yeah, I don't know. You seem to have like I reach to different language communities, and I don't know if this would be useful for those kind of purposes, or as like a general purpose library.
So the next step in that outreach is going from having a POC that can build a OmniBOR tree or document to actually integrating those into the build pipelines of those languages. Right. So if I am building and pardon if I use a little bit of the wrong language, I'm not a .NET developer. If I'm going to compile something with .NET, I want the output to be instrumented and automatically have an OmniBOR tree describing the inputs to that build step or that build process. So would this, would the .NET build system want to use a .NET package to do that? If so, this is perfect, or a step towards that.
Yeah, so they use a mix of C++ for like very low level stuff, but also a lot of it is in .NET itself. So potentially, yeah.
Great. Yeah. So like we have the POCs instrumenting LLVM and GCC. I'd love to see this kind of library then lead to a POC of .NET compiler.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense as a goal. And like I'm happy to follow up on that. Are you able to share with me the information you have on like the existing LLVM, the GCC, anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. So basically, you'll find that there is in the meeting minutes right now, there is a link to migrate github.org, etc. The link that says done literally takes you to the repository page where we've got a bunch of these projects out of the OmniBOR org on GitHub. And
okay.
so, yep. And it should be pointed out, by the way, while you by no means have to, you have the option, should you so choose. The GitBomb.net work that you've done would certainly be welcome if you wanted to move it to the OmniBOR org. We have sort of a mix of things that are in the OmniBOR org and things that aren't right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to transfer that over if that's something you would accept.
Yep, certainly would.
Yep,
with you still as the owner of it.
Yeah, still as the maintainer, obviously.
Yeah.
Because I sadly .NET is not on my list of languages. So.
Nor mine. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't put myself out there as an expert, but just a experienced user, let's say. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, if you would like to make that transfer, just reach out. Are you on the Slack channel at all?
Yeah, the OpenSSF one, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Just reach out there when you're ready to do that, and if you're ready to do that. Again, I have this thing where I don't want to put pressure on you to do things you don't want to do, but if you would like to, you would certainly be welcome, and we can get the transfer done and make sure that the permissions are working for you and whatnot. But
yeah, that sounds like a great next step. I guess I'll reach out on Slack.
Perfect. Yeah, and we do have this. You can see the LLVM work. We also have GCC and bin utils work as well that's been done as proof of concept work. So
excellent. Okay, yeah, that sounds like a good next step. I guess yeah, I'll hand back the screen share then. If you
cool.
Nothing else you want to add?
No, but any questions you have for us about well, anything, frankly?
Not right now, but I feel like I will do once I read a little bit more of the work in LLVM. So yeah, I'll put a pin in it for now.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is we do have a spec repo you'll find there as well, where we're trying to write down and we're relatively close, as you'll see here in a bit, to write down a specification as well.
Yeah, and the way that I've been approaching the spec development work, we've all sort of built this process that switches the meeting times or the meeting content from spec to dev and POC work to iterate and learn from the POC work, like what you've just done, and then take that learning back into the spec development. So anything that as you're implementing this or prototyping it, and you start looking at how to make this part of a .NET compiler, or working with others to do that, and you realize the spec doesn't quite fit that language or that build system or build ecosystem, that's the information we really want back in the spec. And I'm expecting naively, because I don't know the .NET ecosystem that well, that it will probably match what we already have because it's compiled. There may be unique modalities inside .NET that are different from C or Rust or Go that we might need to evolve the spec a little bit to adapt to that. Some of the big gaps right now in I'm expecting the spec not quite to work for non-compiled languages like Python. And that's sort of the next.
I would put it slightly more mildly. I'm expecting there to be interesting things learned from the experience.
Sure.
I expect augmentations to the spec from that experience. I don't expect it to necessarily break. One other thing I would expect to find in the .NET process that would be interesting is we talk about how to persist this information for ELF binaries, right? So .o file, ELF.o files, ELF executables, ELF.sos, etc. But what we haven't discussed, although some of us have looked enough to figure out that there should be a way to figure this out, is things like, I think it's the PE format in Windows, the Mac OS format in the Mac. All those look like they have appropriate-ish, the Java class file format. All those look like they have appropriate-ish places to drop this information, but they all, like with anything else, you want someone closer to those ecosystems trying to work that out rather than further. So.
Okay. I appreciate the explanation.
All right, so let me go ahead and share the agenda again.
Yeah.
All right, so one thing I did forget to mention that I should have mentioned when talking about the name migration, for all of you who had repos in the GitHub org, they've all been migrated to the OmniBOR org. And so you can find them there. GitHub is fantastic about redirecting the links, about redirecting PRs, commit requests, and everything else. So you probably don't even have to go and recheck out your previous repo. But just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. I tried to let folks know up front that this was going to be happening, so there wouldn't be surprises. But just for that, wanted to mention that. And then you may want to, at your leisure, rename those repos. And there may be some refactoring of the code that you want to do around some of the naming, given the OmniBOR to GitBOM name changes. I leave that to you to sort of decide what you want to do there. There are a few things that changed in the spec, like the GitBOM_dir is now OmniBOR_dir, that kind of thing. But anyway, I just wanted to sort of mention that in passing,
and
for other tool builders.
To put voice to the comment Mark put in chat, also welcome Mark. You should probably recheck out your downstream, your local copies, because the redirect, while it's there, won't last forever.
Right.
So, to avoid a surprise random morning when you should have push code and realize it doesn't work that day.
Yep. All right. And then, so coming back around to spec work, because this is a spec meeting, we had been looking at sort of road to the initial spec. So we've now merged the PR for the FS persistent stuff. We've done the name change for OmniBOR fix. There's this question of the to embed or not to embed stuff on the no embed PR mode. And as I'm looking at this, one of the things I've realized is that it actually sort of complicates the core spec a fair bit because of the link farm stuff. And so I would suggest we may want to talk about possibly breaking this into a separate appendix, so that somebody who is, so that basically, we want to keep the complexity for tool builders in the core spec down, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to sort of put that out there. We can discuss that now or later, depending on where folks stand. So there was also one thing that we had discussed previously, and I don't know, this may be another break it into a separate appendix thing, rather than putting in the core spec. How many of you folks remember the build tools and their configuration in the GitBOM tree discussion? That was a while ago. Do you folks mind if I talk through it really briefly, since it's been a bit?
Please do. I think it's a pretty important one, and it comes up about every other time we talk about this in public.
Yeah. So one of the things that comes up a lot is, if you look at sort of like the way GitBOM looks at artifact trees, right? You basically are building these artifact dependency graphs out of from the source code files up, right? CNH files become O files, become executables. Your compiler basically consumes a bunch of inputs and then sends out outputs. Linkers consume a bunch of .o files and spit out executables. And it captures with great precision the inputs that are coming into the system. But there are inputs that aren't quite captured here that people often are interested in, which is precisely what build tools were being used for each build step, right? So, the compiler, it's precise compiler and linker here are not indicated. And then precisely how that build tool was configured for each build step. Now, the configure for each build step is a little tricky because you don't want to capture what I would refer to as ephemeral information. And the classic ephemeral information is, for those of you who've done at various points in the past a lot with C compilers, the -I flag. And the -I flag lets you specify your include directories, which is where you go looking to resolve your count includes. But it shouldn't make any difference at all if there's if I'm building something in my home directory versus Ava building it in their home directory, that shouldn't make a difference. And so it turns out that the actual include DIRs is sort of ephemeral configuration information. But there's other configuration information, again, to take a C example, like defining macro values as part of your C flags. That's actually not ephemeral information. That's actually important configuration information for the build tool. And so, and this information can be important for reproducible builds, folks. And there are a small number of vulnerabilities that are introduced by build tools themselves, and not just the input to the build tools. Sorry for any of you who've had the misfortune of having to deal with that. They don't happen often, but they're often very messy when they do happen. And again, talking about the naive solution, capturing the build tool command line fails because of the ephemeralness of a lot of the inputs, and because file names of build tools are not really the interesting part about it. I don't care where the build tool is in the file system. I care literally what it is. And so this proposal was made to say, look, first, let's just have a very, very simple format for capturing in a document build tool information. And the one I had initially suggested here was name, some human readable name for the tool, ID, the gitoid of the tool. And then this we'd want to change to OmniBOR, but if the tool itself has an embedded OmniBOR ID, then you would want to capture that as well. And because the build tool itself is responsible for writing this out, the build tool is canonically right about its information for this, right? It's right about its name, its ID, and its OmniBOR ID. And then you could consider this build tool, information document simply as a peer to the input source code that's coming into the build tool, and stick it into the dependency graph that way. So you could see the compiler build tool document as a node under the .o files. You have a linker build tool document as a node under the executable. Does this make sense to everyone? Please speak up, because I can't tell whether or not I'm just babbling nonsensically or making sense.
I'll go. The argument is logical to me. This matches my recollection of these discussions from last year. And I also believe that several of the compiler folks that I work with would have concerns about this, that I will do a poor job of parroting.
Okay, no, those concerns are super interesting. Do we have a better option for garnering those concerns other than your parroting?
Not right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could we entice you to parrot a little bit then?
Sure. The format of these files, it's awfully similar to part of the evolving SPDX work. Many of these tools already output these things. Some of these tools have no means to output these things in a durable way. The question of how is this build tool document persisted is, as far as I'm aware, unanswered in the spec or in this proposal.
That's definitely true. And the point of this is the only information you want to capture is in fact stuff that is fairly immutable, right? So if I'm a particular version of GCC, the odds are that this document will be identical for everything I ever build, which will not be true of the other kinds of documents like SPDX that you may want to output, which also means that I can go find it in trees. So I can find it in trees by its gitbom ID or by its gitoid. And in fact, even if I've done some internal tweaks to compilers,
this is completely dependent on the reproducibility of the build tool itself. And build tool build chains are black art, right? You can't rebuild GCC without the previous version of GCC effectively.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Right. But if I'm a wide distributor of a compiler, then I basically, so for example, if you look at the GCC, a particular version of GCC, it's distributed with a Linux distro, it's been built once. And so this doesn't depend on the reproducibility per se.
But it changes, this combined with the embed or not to embed, that is the question, changes the reproducibility of artifacts. If you and I use a GCC compiler instance that has a different git oid, but it is in fact the same version, it was simply not built in a reproducible way. And we take all the same inputs and we compile the same .o and .executables, because the git oid of our compilers was different, even though the binary output of each build step is the same, by embedding this compiler BTID document hash in the tree, we change the hash tree of the output and we break reproducibility and verification.
Well, so what it really comes down to, and this is a deep philosophical question that has to do with how you choose to define reproducible builds.
Yeah.
And I say this with all due respect to somebody who first got involved in reproducible build discussions internally in about 2004, right? Because we care very much about reproducibility of our builds. And so basically, any discussion of reproducible builds essentially is saying, if I take an equivalence class of inputs, if I have a set of equivalent inputs, I should get a set of equivalent outputs, right?
So,
and good.
So I'm thinking about maybe we can create two GitHub ID. One is the original one, then we just create an extra one. That one we don't need to embed into the output artifact. We can use a link farm like that to just store it as an external identifier. Is that?
No, absolutely. Well, absolutely. So there's the embed, no embed discussion, and the point I was trying to make though was not to sort of revive that discussion, which I think is an important and valuable discussion for other reasons. But the point I was making is, if you say equivalent inputs should always produce equivalent outputs, is your definition of reproducible builds. And the reproducible build people generically want to take, and I'm actually in favor of this, equivalence is saying two outputs are equivalent if they are byte for byte identical, which I like as an equivalence relation, right? Then basically there are two attitudes you can take towards equivalent inputs. The first attitude you can take is to say that two sets of inputs are equivalent if they are byte for byte identical inputs. Meaning, if I take exactly the same source code files and exactly the same tools with exactly the same configuration, I should get the same output, right? That's one equivalence definition, and that's the one I'm actually familiar with because that's strong reproducible builds. There's another definition running loose, which is basically to say any set of inputs which produce that set of output bytes are equivalent inputs. And in this world, the CP command plus the output is itself an equivalent set of inputs to a build process, to the actual build itself. That one strikes me, there are people who are using that one, but that one's not anything I could get to fly internally for reproducible builds as a definition.
So I'm going to sidestep for a moment and propose that we update somewhere on the site or Spec with these two definitions to give them short handles. The second one, if we just for the moment call it weak reproducibility, I'll reframe with an example. All of us could go write hello world and we could all use different comment strings. Those comment strings are discarded by the compiler. So the hash of the input files will all be unique, but the output will be exactly the same. Right? This weak reproducibility is a reality that we don't currently address even in our terminology in the spec. And it seems to be the root of the unanswerable questions we come back to with to embed or not embed. And this question here, are we biasing towards strong reproducibility or weak reproducibility?
Well, and the trick with reproducibility is figuring out what inputs are equivalent without actually executing the build itself. is a highly language dependent question. And so if I simply give you ipso facto 2 source code files and say, are these equivalent? It's really almost impossible to say because they're only equivalent in the context of a larger build. Now, apparently in talking to folks in reproducible builds, where this often comes up is they're building smeared across many, many build servers, and those build servers all have different kernel headers. And so they want to sort of fudge over the fact that their build environments are highly heterogeneous.
And constantly changing.
So, but anyway, that had been the suggestion about capturing the build tool identification in tree. And then there was an analogous for allowing the compiler to output its, for outputting the compiler's build tool information. There had been an analogous proposal that had been made around capturing the build tool configuration also as an element in the tree. But I think because this is a more complicated conversation, it's something that we should break off for discussion for an appendix rather than putting into the core spec, because I think we'd like to get something together for the core spec that we can move forward with, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do folks have other thoughts and opinions? It's mostly just been Ava and I talking so far, and I would like to hear other thoughts and opinions.
Going to hold the awkward silence until somebody else speaks up.
I'll get back by next week to see if embedding the build tree for the compiler. I mean, what it involves, and present a summary of my understanding next week.
Thank you.
Yeah. So there was a comment there was a comment that someone had made about constantly updating build pipelines, which is actually definitely a real thing. I have that as well, but I also have requirements to be able to reproduce things in a very strong sense. So actually knowing what went into building a thing. And this is also, if in the rare occasion where you run into compiler bugs, and they do exist that are security pertinent, you would like to know what actually went into what compiler was used to build what thing, because that way when you sort of get that back, you can say, okay, do I have to go track this binary down and replace it? I don't know if that's something that folks who have these big automated pipelines have also run into.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the concerns is, as Eva pointed out, there could be different build tools that generate the same output. So embedding in that case, what is the value add of embedding the BTID or even giving the BTID, because they're all different, but they're going to generate the same output, right? So I mean, even if there is a bug in the compiler, you're going to have multiple IDs which can contain the same bug, right? So you can't uniquely identify the version.
If there are multiple entities independently building from the same source code with different compilers and publishing those build trees to a shared, auditable repository, it then provides interesting data to those who are looking for vulnerabilities or looking for flaws to say, Ed and I both have different compilers that build the same binary output for X and Y, and yet for project Z came up with a different result given the same input. Why is project Z different in our different compilers? There's additional information you can glean after the fact, given those build trees.
Yeah, so what I'm thinking more, the reason I brought it up is, like, we have the open source version, and then we add customizations and build our own release compilers. So essentially same source, but I could have tweaked some things which do not matter for that application that I'm building. But so even though the sources are slightly different, for the purpose of the application that I'm building, it makes no difference, because maybe the customization that I added does not come into play while building that application. So yeah, things like that, you know.
I
Yeah, I
think
mean,
it's I
Go ahead.
think it's always possible to you know, from the same input files to generate slightly different output artifact, right? Also, it's also possible from slightly different input file to generate the same output artifact. Both are possible, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I think to Bharathi's point, Bharathi, the idea being, if we got to the point where the compiler itself has built in its own OmniBOR ID, and I have a build tool information document that is output by it as a tree in this, even if we make our changes to it, you would still have things in the tree that would potentially point back at the vulnerability, because you can trace back the tools tree independent of the outputs tree. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's I think it could be a hit or miss depending on where the bug lies, but I think it's similar to the principle of what we are already doing for vulnerability detection, right? So I think yes.
Mm-hmm.
My question is how yeah, let me think about it. I just don't want to jump in without thinking through this. Yeah.
Yep. Cool. All right.
Given the conversation we
Maybe-
just had about reproducible builds, I want to jump back real quick in our agenda to upcoming events. I did learn a couple of days ago that reproduciblebuilds.org is having their first in-person conference since the pandemic. So I want to put that on folks' radar. Might be valuable for at least somebody from this group to go. It's in Hamburg later this year.
What's the date?
Let me check. October 31st to November 2nd.
I'm out.
So
It's
your
my son's birthday.
so you're basically saying that someone would have to go to Germany roughly
For
during
Halloween.
October.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be a
Yeah.
tough assignment, y'all.
Yep.
Okay. So I think we've sort of beat that to death, and I think the answer there is move to an appendix. Is probably the answer there. There's a step on overall review of the spec. Yeah, there's a step on overall review of the spec that I think we probably need to do as well, because we've sort of been doing this piecewise and sort of looking through the spec and wandering through it step by step by step, I think is probably going to be very helpful. Is that something we want to sort of ask folks to do a walk through the spec and identify things they think need improving for the next call, the next spec call, which is in 2 weeks?
What kind of a review are you looking for?
Well, I mean, basically having folks read through the spec document and going, okay, does this make sense? Is this something I think I could follow as part of implementing this in a tool?
I can take a look at it.
Okay, that would be very welcome. There is an art to writing specs I am, and part of it is making sure that you catch the things that people are trying to read out of them. So, because the more eyeballs you go through, the better.
I can't promise I'll do a brilliant job, but I can take a look at it.
Well, I mean, the lovely thing about treating documentations as things that you are essentially testing by having people read them is that different levels of expertise in the reading process actually improve coverage. So, I've occasionally come across docs where if you put them in front of an expert, you're fine, but 90% of everyone who's going to read them is not an expert, and so you're screwed. Okay. And then we're running up against the good.
Go ahead.
Please. No, I was transitioning. Go ahead.
I was going to comment that when I'm giving talks, that is very relevant. But for a spec, the audience of the spec is probably not the general public, but rather tool builders, tool implementers, maintainers of compilers and builds chains. So that's our audience. There is, I think, if not the same language we can expect, a similar set of knowledge and understanding of practices we can expect from that audience.
And then I think you had brought this up, Ava, and I think you're completely right on this, that we'd like to try and see how this applies to more dynamic languages before we sort of harden the arteries on the spec. And we sort of identified Java is one example. It's a dynamically loaded language. Python is thought of as a non-compiled language. Technically, it is compiled, but not in any way that matters to the argument at hand. And then looking at how this would apply to sort of build packaging systems like RPM or OCI containers. And I think outreach is, doing an overview of the spec, getting it cleaned up, and then outreaching to those communities are probably a good idea before we sort of harden the arteries there.
And then do we harden the arteries before approaching a standards body in one form or another, or move towards a standards development process to bring in those communities is the other open question I have in mind. Which is cart before the horse, I don't know. If folks have opinions on how best to approach this over the next 12 months in terms of order of operations, I'm all ears. Is it Monday morning? No one has opinions?
I just stay quiet on the spec calls mostly.
Okay.
Okay. We are up against the top of the hour, and I do want to be respectful of folks' time. So shall we call it? And I will see you all next week.
Thank you all very much. Thanks, Ed, for running the meeting. I will hopefully see you next week, though I might be on an airplane at this time.
Okay.